I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everybody. Today is February 7th. It is 9 a.m. I am Commissioner Aaron Mays, representing District 3. On my left is Commissioner Bill Rippon, representing District 1, and on my right is Kevin Cook, representing District 2. First item, please.
First item is item 3, consent agenda.
There are 3 items on the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Commissioner Rippon, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Next item, please.
Item 4, new business A, County Clerk number 1, consider all voucher payments.
Okay, so under multiple departments, Willis Tower, Watson Midwest, Inc., totaling $808,789 is for motor vehicle and property insurance. Under information technology, computer information concepts, totaling $61,225 is for an annual agreement for tax administration solution platform. Also, Eagle Software, Inc., totaling $12,636.06 is for annual renewal for backup tape platform maintenance. Under Parkland Acquisition, Kent Fence Company, $45,500 is for Lake Shawnee off-leash Bark Park. Vouchers total $3,996,389.01. Any questions? If not, I'll move for approval of the vouchers.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion that's been made by Commissioner Rippon, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Next item, please.
Item A2, consider correction orders.
I'll move for approval of the correction orders.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Next item, please.
Item B, Weed Department number 1, consider approval of request to award portions of the bid for weed management chemicals to Nutrient Solutions and Grass Pad Inc., and to reject and rebid chemical items multiple times in 2022.
All right, John Landon.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Landon, Director of the Weed Department. This item this morning is just a follow-up from January 13th, where we rejected a bid for chemicals and awarded some. So this is the results of that bid. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for John?
I don't have any.
None.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion by Commissioner Rippon, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Thank you, John.
Commissioners.
Next item, please.
Item C, Planning Department number 1, consider approval of a preliminary final plat to create a 2-lot subdivision and a variance to allow an existing residence to have a 19-foot rear setback. 30 foot is required. The site is zoned RA1 and is located at 8326 Southwest 77th Street in Auburn Township.
Good morning, Commissioners. Randy Anderson, Planning Department Director. This item is, as the clerk mentioned, a 2-lot subdivision at 8326 Southwest 77th Street in Auburn Township. The property, you're looking at the primary, at the preliminary plat. The primary residence was constructed on the back part of the lot on what is now proposed to be Lot 2. This other building was an accessory building that was permitted, and it was correctly placed on the property with the right setbacks for it to be used as an accessory building. What happened over time was that this other building, the accessory building, was converted into a residence, and so we ended up with two residences on one lot. And by virtue of it being in a residence, the rear setback is 30 feet for a rear setback for a residence. They've got 19. So whereas that setback was legal originally, now it's got a problem because it doesn't conform with the zoning regulations. So that's the nature of the variance that they're asking consideration for. This is the preliminary plat. That's showing you how they would split the property, where the secondary residence, where the second residence would be located on its own lot. The primary residence originally built would be on its own lot, and they would share access onto the property. That would get rid of the zoning issue and also make the property legally conforming. What they have done on the preliminary plat is, at the request of the staff, is include a note that says if the residence on lot 1, proposed lot 1 is ever destroyed, the variance would go away, and then they would be required to comply with the 30-foot rear setback if they were to reconstruct the home on that lot. So with those conditions imposed, it would comply with all subdivision regulations and resolve the issue of two homes being on a single lot. And the variance would also be, I mean, it makes no sense to require the building to be torn down at this point, since it's already there. It just, if it's ever reconstructed, it would be required to comply. So basically, the staff and the planning commission are recommending approval, subject to the one condition in your staff report, that they apply for a building permit to legally establish the second residence on proposed lot 1. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
I don't have, but move to open public hearing.
We do not have a
No.
need for a public hearing on this particular item.
Yep.
However, if the applicant's here and would like to speak,
I think he's here.
okay,
Don't see him in the
all
audience.
right. Is there,
I don't have any questions. I mean, it's pretty well set out as to what occurred. I guess are all plumbing and issues, sanitary issues complied with?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any other
Okay.
questions.
I'll move for approval then.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Next item, please.
Item C2, public hearing and consider approval of resolution number 2022-13, a conditional use permit to allow a sand extraction operation on a 55.4 acre site located on northwest Cripey Road in Tecumseh Township.
Again, Commissioners, Randy Anderson, Planning Department. The request is not a rezoning. Some people have called in saying we're going to rezone this property in order to allow a sand excavation use. They are, the zoning would remain the same. This is just a conditional use permit just for the one use for the sand excavation, which is a permitted use in the district, subject to your approval of a conditional use permit. With that clarification being made, property is located as shown on Cripey Road. The Kansas River is to the top of the picture to the north. You have a large wooded area in the floodway of the river between the subject property and the river. And most of the land out there is in the either floodway or floodplain of the Kansas River, and is largely used for agricultural purposes or just open space. Here's a picture that shows the subject property. You're looking at the property from Cripey Road. The little gravel road right there is the approximate location of where the driveway would come into this property. You're looking straight to the north. You can see how the property slopes back to the trees, and beyond the trees is the river. The area that received notice is shown in this diagram. There is one residence shown. I don't believe they showed up for the meeting, for the public hearing, but a number of people outside this area did show up for the public hearing, and that's noted in your staff report. Just to give you a quick overview of the project, before this item was ever docketed on your agenda, the staff required the applicant to fully comply with the zoning regulations, particularly the sand excavating regulations that are in the zoning ordinance. So they were required to provide all this information, an erosion control plan, stormwater control plan, proposed methods for how to prevent groundwater contamination, a cross-section of the property from borings that were taken on the property that shows the depths and general lay of the land underneath the property, so we could see where the sand gravel is located at in the depth of the water table. They were to identify impoundments on site and on adjoining properties so that we could judge if the proposed plant would have any impact on adjoining properties as well as this property, and a land reclamation plan showing how the land would be restored to comply with your ordinance and also with the state of Kansas regulations, and also a truck routing plan, which I'll show you right now. This has been the subject of some of the most comments we've heard from. The subject property is located on the top right-hand corner of this picture, basically where where the green and the tan are located. They would come down Cripey Road to hit Shawnee, down to 2nd Street and over to DuPont and come out at that location on Highway 40. The reason that location was selected was a requirement that from KDOT that because of Highway 40 making this big turn, this was too close with the trucks moving slowly in and out of the property. This would be entirely too close to the curvature with the speed of the traffic based on the posted speed limit on the highway. Other than that, this location down here on DuPont actually has a configuration, a geometry of this intersection that is much more suitable for slow-moving traffics to enter and exit the property onto and off of DuPont Road onto Highway 40. So that is why you see this long line from Shawnee over to DuPont. The reason why that intersection is the way it is because you have these industrial uses located up to the north of 2nd Street. And in this picture, you can clearly see that, that there are some scattered residents located along 2nd Street, and you have one residence located to the west of the subject property, a couple of residences down here at the corner of Shawnee and 2nd, and then you have several on the highway and much more on DuPont. And the reason why I mentioned the DuPont is because in recent days, we've heard from a number of people on DuPont. Those letters that I provided you on your desk are mainly from people who have commented in the last 2-3 days about concerns about trucks, impact of truck traffic on their neighborhood. So I wanted to just cover the reasons and rationale for the truck route the way it's proposed. I'm going to let the applicant tell you more about the specific details about this. But one thing I want to make sure that you understood and that the applicant and the audience understands is that if this conditional use permit is granted, while it does cover the entire property, if it's approved, it only covers phase 1. The conditions of approval and the resolution that's before you would require that new plans be submitted and compliance demonstrated to this board and to the community when phase 2 comes in and any future phases of the property. So by no means does this approval grant carte blanche approval for the entire project. It doesn't. If those areas are approved by this body, I would assume that these conditions would probably be carried forward onto those properties, and any new conditions you want to impose or you feel are necessary and appropriate would be imposed at those times when they come in for the future phases. So with that said, I'll just give you a couple of points. The floodway of the river is shown on the right in this blue. So this is the area where all the trees are located north of the property, and the river is up here to the north. And so that's how that property would lay out. About the public hearing, we had approximately 25 citizens attend the January 10th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. 12 spoke in opposition. No one spoke in support of the request. Since then, I indicated we received 4 additional letters in opposition since the public hearing. Those letters were from people on DuPont Street who were mainly concerned about the about water quality issues. Apparently, there's Douglas County Rural Water District number 8 is located in somewhere in the vicinity of the subject property, and they were concerned about this plant having a negative impact on the water quality of that district, and also the truck traffic, as I've mentioned. The Planning Commission heard the item also on January 12th and found that it does comply with the basic zoning ordinance regulations, and that the additional conditions that are in the resolution are consistent with those imposed on other sand quarry requests, and that they are satisfactory to the county engineer and to Tecumseh Township and to the applicant, and then based on all of that it would satisfy the golden criteria. So the commission did vote 3-1 to recommend approval to this body. I'm not going to go through all 24 conditions unless there's some in particular that you want to go over. There are some key points that I've highlighted in yellow that I do want to touch on because they're important, particularly important, I should say. They're all important. 1B is a requirement that a traffic impact analysis be performed and submitted to the county engineer and to Tecumseh Township. That it shows that it assesses the impact of the volume of the truck trips over the route of the truck plan. So they would be looking at all 4 roads that the truck routing would cover. What they want to find out is what improvements would the township or the county or the applicant be required to make in order to mitigate the impacts of the trucks. So if the trucks, right now there's very little traffic on that road. It's mainly rural. There's only a few houses out there, so it'll be pretty clearly obvious what impacts are made by the trucks versus cars or farm equipment and other machinery. So they want to establish a baseline of what is out there today, and then assess the impacts so that different agencies or the applicant can make necessary improvements to the road to keep the road functional for all uses that are conducting out on those streets. So that's a big deal. Item D requires all permits and licenses from the state and federal agencies. There are Corps of Engineer requirements that would apply. There's Kansas regulations that would apply. This is just basically the zoning part of the process. By no means does this give them the right to tomorrow walk out there and start digging in the dirt. That's not the case. They still have a lot of technical requirements they have to satisfy and things they have to prove to the federal and state agencies before that happens. This is just the very first step of their process. Item 3, this is what I mentioned before, that all future phases of the development shall be subject to a planning commission review and county commission approval of a site plan and supporting documents pertaining to each new phase. So if something is not happening to your satisfaction in phase 1, you can nip it in the bud in phase 2, or go, say we didn't go far enough with conditions, we need to do something else to make this thing work. So by no means does this give them carte blanche for the whole project. Item 5, all operations, including on-site operations and truck traffic, is limited to 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. On Saturdays between March and November to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So if they're operating outside those hours of operation, they're in violation of the terms of this conditional use permit if it's granted. Condition number 10 is one we've used successfully on other similar uses. It says that any maintenance of the road that's normal maintenance, not attributable to traffic coming to and from the site, is the responsibility of the county or to the township, whichever is applicable based on the road we're talking about. But anything that's directly attributable to the sand excavation operation, is those expenses to repair roads and infrastructure is responsibility of the applicant. Number 13, this is one that I think is particularly important. This speaks to the powers of the commission. If the CUP is granted, the commission has the authority to do a number of things. If it's determined that compliance is not occurring, you can stop the project immediately if they're operating outside of the conditional use regulations that you were to adopt if you approve. And you can order them to adopt remedial measures to fix anything that would bring the property and its operation back into compliance with the resolution if granted. And then items C, D, and E, these are due process procedures that are laid out that give you, the commissioners, the ability to suspend operations, suspend the permit, or to revoke the permit. So if something is to be happening out there that's grievously wrong, you can stop it following these due process procedures that are spelled out in this condition. The operations of the sand pit require the submittal of a reclamation plan by, in a manner prescribed by the State Conservation Commission, and all the steps are laid out there of what they're required to do in order to have a compliant land reclamation project, so that we're not left with an empty hole or a spot on the ground where nothing is occurring to mitigate erosion and other issues. The operation will provide a performance bond where it would give the county the right to come in and do what's necessary to reclaim the project. Say if the operator went out of business and left and vacated the site, you could invoke the performance bond and to remediate the bond, remediate the issues left by the project being abandoned or in a poor condition. The request, if it's granted, would have a 30-year life, would expire on January 1st, 2052. You would require them to come in every 2 years and do a report, give the county and the township the ability to go out and assess what's happening on the roads and report back to the commission what's happening. And if it's just a checkpoint where we can check on the project. You have your fingers on the project regularly, where the owners can come in, people on joint properties can come in and say they're doing this improperly or doing that. So it keeps your fingers on the project, and you can, part of your remediation process, if there's any issues, this could help you address it through this 2-year review every 2 years. The operation would only be for sand excavation. It would not allow any ready mix type of operation or batching plants, anything like that that would make a bunch of noise, bunch of dust. Strictly the mining of the sand, the stockpiling of the sand, and putting it on trucks and moving it off the property. This is a big deal because in some places these projects do have batching plants, and they do create a major hardship for everybody in the area. You can hear the sound of them from a considerable distance. Condition number 24 was something that was proposed by this applicant, where he would provide annually 100-foot dust. He would install at their expense dust mitigation materials on the road in front of the residents located on the 2 parcels that are noted on the property. Just to put more information about those properties, I'll show you where they are. The corner, this is the corner of Shawnee and 2nd Street. The property in question here, you have a house on the southeast corner and one on the northwest corner. Shawnee Road comes down from the property. So this is the north-south spoke hitting 2nd Street, which is the east-west. More specifically, this is the property on the northwest corner. You see Shawnee Road, it has the gravel, caliche type surface, and 2nd Avenue, or 2nd Street has pavement. You can see there the tracks of cars going through there that cross this intersection. The truck trips would go down that road and turn to their right and head back to the west toward DuPont. This is the property on the southeast corner. The trucks would not come through this street, provided they follow the truck routing plan. And it would not go east, it would not go south, they would be turning to the west. Here's the subject property, the western limits of that property. This is important because it shows a couple of things. The house to the west is located 211 feet from that property line. This is one of the houses that would receive the dust mitigation materials from on cripey here. This other home is located approximately 807 feet north of cripey. So this house would not be affected directly by dust, such as that one would, or the ones down on Shawnee and 2nd Avenue. This is the home on cripey. You see it's very close to the road. It's probably no more than 30 feet from the right-of-way line there. What's also interesting about this picture is it does show you the condition of cripey. This picture is about 2 years old, so it's not too much different now as I drove it from how it was in this picture. It's a narrow road. The hard surface is in the middle, kind of more of a caliche surface, and you got more loose gravel on the shoulders of the road. You're going to hear a lot of testimony about the train and the impact of the train. On Shawnee Road, there is this controlled approach. You see it has the signal arms, and there's not so much of a hump on this crossing where trucks could high center on the tracks. But this is the road. People driving the trucks would come down from cripey down here, down Shawnee, and get to the intersection that I showed you before. That is my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this point or after the public hearing.
Any questions for Randy?
Brad?
Do we need to open public hearing first?
I was going to go ahead and allow questions for just Randy before we do the public hearing.
This is Jim Crow, Shawnee County Councilor, for the record. Yeah, my recommended course of action, if you have some questions for Randy, that's fine. Then you're going to want to disclose your ex parte contacts, if any, and then open the public hearing and receive testimony.
Okay. Great. Any questions specifically for Randy?
I have a few questions. The existing roads, some of them are paved, some of them are this caliche. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a hard clay, caliche
Will
mix.
those roads have to be improved before this operation could function? They wouldn't have to.
But this owner, I mean, this applicant would be required to maintain any diminished ability of the road to do what it's, to perform its function. Any routine maintenance, well, cripey, for example, the county comes in, I mean, the township comes in once a year and does something on the road as necessary, putting in new gravel or new surfacing to keep the road in a basic condition that it's in right now. If the trucks were to, and they would continue to do that. But this applicant, if this is approved, would be required to do any additional repairs and maintenance on the road that were created by the truck traffic. So if there all of a sudden there's these big deep ruts, like if it was a rainy day or a rainy week, and the road got swamped and has become soft, and the trucks were to drive down it and create deep ruts, that would be the responsibility of the applicant.
And who makes the determination if they're responsible for some improvements? Who would that be? Our public works director and say, hey,
Yeah.
this is...
Public Works handles DuPont, and the township would take care of
So it'd be a
Shawnee.
township decision?
It'd be both. I mean, you know, KDOT would be looking at the highway. Our Public Works would be looking at DuPont, and Township would be looking at these other two roads, Shawnee and cripey. Plus, every 2 years, you have a chance to look at it, and our county engineer would go out and look at it in more detail and make additional assessments. So if the neighbors see something that's happening where the road's not able to perform its basic functions, you know, there are remedies to come in, talk to Public Works or to the township. Plus, every 2 years, you have the annual review.
Okay. I'll disclose, I had one phone call concerning this project and right around 15 emails. I may be off an email or two.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
questions? So cripey and Shawnee are the township's responsibility. You disclosed that DuPont would be the responsibility of Shawnee County. The Highway 40 is the responsibility of Kansas Department of Transportation. Who has responsibility over Second Street?
I think that's the county. I think that's the county. I wish Kurt was in here. I think that's a county road. Kurt is next door. If he needs to come in, he will answer this question. But I believe that's a county road.
Okay. And is there being an assessment done currently before this application would be approved as to what the road conditions are today, so you have a baseline to operate from?
That would be the TIA in condition number 1. There he is. Is Second Street a county road or township?
Up to DuPont, east of DuPont, it's township.
Township,
So it would be a shared then responsibility?
yes.
And does this have to have the approval of the Tecumseh Township on the TIA or the traffic impact study before it would begin?
Yes, sir. And we've already been coordinating with them for the last 4 or 5 months. This all started back in probably late September, early October, and that was a primary reviewer we had involved in this case from the very beginning.
And are there any concerns presently about the abilities of the trucks to be able to travel on these roads, Cripey, Shawnee, Second, DuPont?
Not from the township, no, and not from Public Works on the county road.
Okay. Now, many of the corresponding emails that I've received outline several issues, one being the condition of the roadways, one being the upkeep of the roadways. The next is the amount of truck traffic. Many of the emails suggest that there will be 20 to 50 trucks per day traveling on these roads. Are there any limitations on the number or volume of trucks?
The applicant himself at the planning commission meeting indicated there'd be fewer than 20. If the commission wants to impose a limitation on the number of trucks, you have the ability to do that, but that was the testimony that they provided previous.
Some of the applicant, or some of the letters touch on enforcement of traffic laws, whether or not they would be speeding or safety issues for the citizens along the roadways. Is there going to be any contact with law enforcement about the patrol or enforcement of the roadways?
We haven't had any contact with the county sheriff's office. You see the condition of the roads. They don't lend themselves particularly to speeding. They're narrow. They have loose aggregates. So it's probably not reasonable to think they're going to be going more than 30, 40 miles an hour at the most. I don't know what the posted speed limit out there. I would assume it's about 30, 35. The applicant would be able to tell you more about that. They just don't lend themselves to that kind of activity.
The other emails, they would touch on issues of groundwater contamination, whether or not a plan has been submitted regarding any contamination, and whether or not there would be any possibility of contaminating the groundwater. As in many of the emails, again, many of the emails look like they're cut and paste from one applicant or one original email, but they ask about 5 different groundwater wells in Rural Water District number 8 in Douglas County, and the ecological impact on those waters.
I don't know particularly where the intake for the water is located at, but we have a representative from the water district is here today to address that concern.
I would disclose that prior to the applicant submitting his application, he did contact me, or they was contacted by the applicant regarding their application. I also did have a phone message, and I've received 20 emails from people that live in Tecumseh or around the area. So, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I don't have any further questions. I will disclose also prior to the applicant being submitted, I had contact with the applicant. I've also received quite a few emails. I didn't count them, but I would say probably 15 to 20 emails and a couple voicemails as well. And then also, I did have a conversation with a member of the Planning Commission, about 90-second conversation yesterday. So that's my ex parte communication. With that, I think we'll go ahead and open the hearing. I guess I'll make a motion that we open the hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Rippon. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. We are in a public hearing. The way we're going to do this, I've got 3 people who signed up to speak in opposition. So what we'll do first is have the applicant give their presentation. If there are any other, since I don't have anyone else signed up to speak for the applicant, then we will move into the opposition and go from there. So, Mr. Eckert.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Rich Eckert, 1800 Northwest Brickyard Road. I'm with the Bettis Group of Companies. The Bettis Group of Companies is actually headquartered here in Topeka, Kansas. We're licensed to do business in 8 different states with just our paving division and multiple other states with some of our other companies. We are an infrastructure company. We primarily work on roads of all kinds, as well as commercial and residential developments. As you can imagine, inputs to construction materials is a heavy part of our job. Quite frankly, we are in the low bid business. We only win jobs if we're the low bidder. Our primary customers are KDOT, KTA, and cities and counties. So one of the things that we've discovered in order to be the low bidder is something that we call vertical integration. We started out as Bettis Asphalt, but then we discovered that if we controlled our own trucking, we could have a better bid. And then we thought that if we controlled our own quarry products, we could have an even better bid. Asphalt, though, is our mother ship at this point in time. And the 3 main components of asphalt are asphaltic oil, which will not be on site at the sand pit, by the way, rock, and sand. So the more of those components that we can control, the better our bids will be for municipalities. So that's how we got started in this business. I would like to add that right now we do have a sand operation already. It's located basically if you would take Yuri Road to the river on the south side, that operation is in the river. So we are permitted by the Corps of Engineers. And if you lived in this community for any length of time and paid attention to infrastructure, you'll know that periodically the Corps wipes the river clean. In other words, they will not renew the permits, and then they let the river restore itself. That happened a couple of times since I've lived here in the community, and it will happen again. So even though we do have a thriving sand operation now, we're at the mercies of the Corps of Engineer, and we'll never know if those permits get renewed. So the sand's become an important part of our operation, so we decided to start looking for a backup site in case that day happens. And although Randy said that we contacted him in September, quite frankly, it's taken us a year to get here. You can only look for where the sand is. The sand is where the sand is. I mean, that's pretty elementary if you stop and think about it. The second part is that it has to be, you have to have an owner of the land that's willing to cooperate with you. Here, we don't own these sites. We don't buy these sites. We lease them. And I don't know how many contacts we made along the river, more than a dozen, I know that, before we finally found someone that's willing to talk with you and enter into a lease. And that's what happened here. And then the third part is you need an ability to get that product to where it needs to go, and you need the permits. And as you know, the permitting process is very detailed. At some points in time, we've had over 30 quarries. Almost all of them need permits. I can tell you this, the vast majority of our permits have between 6 and 10 conditions. We're sitting on 24, and most of them have A, B, C, D, and E. So this will be probably our most regulated permit that we would have, with the possible exception of our Big Springs Quarry, which, by the way, is also in Shawnee County, along with Douglas County. So if we are successful today, we can all acknowledge the fact that this will be one of our most regulated properties that we have. See if I can get this thing to go. Again, I'll give you a little bit of our history. We've been around since 2004, Mid-States Materials has, and you can see the 3 states that we're currently in. I will point out that, as you can imagine in this industry, we are heavily insured. And one of our insurances, and I'll bring it up now since it's already been part of a conversation, is that we do cover pollution liability. We have a very hefty policy on pollution, excuse me. I will say this, we've been around since 2004, and not only have we never been sued for a pollution spill, we've never even had a claim filed. So we are very proud of our record. Here's a little map of kind of where we are. The vast majority of these, of course, are quarries just in the state of Kansas. This isn't our Oklahoma or our Missouri map. Number 21 up there next to the Highway 75, that's where our Yuri Sand Pit's located. Again, sand is a very important part of our building materials, and this is going to serve a good portion of the county. I will point out that this sand site is approximately 20 miles away from Yurish, and as you can tell, that gives us a 20 miles advantage for infrastructure on eastern Shawnee County. We do a lot of work in eastern Shawnee County, and it would make our projects cheaper if we can get the sand from the east side as opposed to driving it in from the west side. So this is an important part of the eastern Shawnee County infrastructure. Again, here's a satellite picture of our site. A little bit further out to show you what the river looks like. So we have drilled this site. I mean, you can just literally look at it on Google Maps and see the sand, but we've drilled 50 feet down, sand all the way. Our site plan again. I'll take this point to point out that, and again, Randy alluded to this, but the local permit is the first thing that we need to do, but it by no means means that this project is going to go forward. I have with me today Cole Anderson. He's our Environmental Health and Safety Director. The state permits, as you can imagine, are quite onerous as well, and we'll have to jump through every single one of their hoops before we can open this, and that will take some time also. I might also point out that you can see in the lower left, you'll see our sand dredge. Again, for time being, this is a backup site. We do not have a dredge identified that's going to go here yet. So this isn't something like we're going to be out there with shovels on Tuesday. So there was quite a conversation with our office and your Public Works Department on how we're going to make sure that the banks are stable, how there's not going to be a lot of erosion. And it was quite a learning process for all of us. But one of the things we talk about is what the river does, because quite frankly, the river's the king here. The river's going to do what the river's going to do, and there's nothing that we can really do about it. But what we can do is protect our sites. And as you can see here, that red arrow shows us what the river wants to do. It wants to go east, and the current topography makes it go a little bit to the north. So we have to understand how the river functions there. And I would say that we hired Finney and Turnipseed to help us with this plan, and they'll be with us in the future if we need any further engineering. But I can say that no one knows more about the Kansas River than Finney and Turnipseed. They've built almost every single bridge that goes over the river, and they were very instructive with us on how we need to proceed. And one of the things we talked about was armoring our site. In other words, we armor it so that it's protected from what happens in the event of a flood or anything like that. I've included in your package the full letter that Craig Maddox wrote us, but this is the second page, and that paragraph is the most important one, and it basically is his recommendation about what we need to do. So when you see in the permit that we have a 350-foot boundary from a agricultural berm and then another 350 feet buffer from the actual river itself, that's not a number that Randy made up, Kurt made up, or I made up. That's a number that comes from Finney and Turnipseed. And that's the paragraph that basically gives us that number. He also talks about armoring the north wall, right, the northwest wall at all times on all the pits that we have. And it's going to be armored with broken concrete, rock, riprap, whatever the case may be. And we talked extensively with Kurt about how we're going to do that. And of course, with the proposed CUP that you have in front of you, Kurt gets a lot of say in how we do this. So this isn't something we can go lay down 4 rocks and walk away. We have to meet Kurt's approval on this. So this is the Yuri site. This is what we're doing right now. And once again, we have the exact same problem. The arrow shows you what the river wants to do, and basically the river is wanting to attack everything that we have there and push through. And guess what? We've armored that. We just did that without even, this is how the site is. And we did this before we even talked to Finney and turnip seed. So this is what an armored site looks like, and here we use concrete rubble. Concrete rubble is every bit as good as riprap, if not better. And one of the reasons it's better is that when it comes time to reclaim the site, it's easier to push around than riprap would be. Again, here's the haul route. As Randy's already shown you, I do have a different picture to show you why. The other reason we chose the site, and Randy did allude to this, is it has acceleration, deceleration lanes out on US 40. This is a very important safety component. It's the safest way to have truck traffic, and we're fortunate enough, and I believe it was due to the fact that the Westar plant and the Celphane plant already exist there, is that the state put in those acceleration, deceleration lanes. So during the Planning Commission meeting, there was lots of testimony about how the trains like to just stop. They just stop and they cover up that intersection, and it's on our proposed haul route, and they'll be there for hours and hours and hours. And yes, we know that. We've promised in the CUP that we're going to use that haul route. We're dedicated to that haul route. And if a train costs us a full day, that's what happens. We're just going to live with it. I would say that we already know how to live with it, because my office, if that train wasn't there, we would be able to look at the brand new Love's gas station on Highway 75. This is Friday. That train got there at 1:30, and when I left at 5:30, it was still sitting there. So yes, we understand how trains do this, because this is what happens at our home office. So it's like I said, we're dedicated to the haul route that's contained in the CUP, and if the train shuts us down for a day, that's what happens. Our company won't collapse because we lose a day of production from a sand pit. I would also like to take this moment to talk about the number of truck traffic. That Yuri Road is our main sand site, and when we sat down and did the math with it, that averaged about 20 truck trips a day, right? That's the average. This accessory pit won't necessarily take away from those. So we don't see a situation where we're going to average 20 truck trips from that sand pit anytime soon. So I've been kind of watching the social media, and you know, it was raised that it'd be as high as 50 truck trips, and I just we don't get that on our main quarry site. So a little bit more about our company and the promises that we're going to make going forward, and the promises that we make in the conditional use permit. This is the magazine. It's sort of the Bible of our industry, and we made the cover of that. This is our Big Springs plant. That's actually located in Shawnee County, and this article was written about how we're environmentally friendly and the things that we do with quarries. And I will add this: a quarry, and the Big Springs plant certainly qualifies as that, is much different than a sand pit. There's no blasting at a sand pit, which is, when I come to these meetings like this to get permits for our quarries, there's a lot of discussion about blasting, and it's the thing that causes the neighbors the most concern. There's no blasting here. These dredges are modern, they're efficient, and they're quiet. So this is actually one, although I'm here to ask you for a conditional use permit, and I have 24 limitations in my cup with A, B, C, this is actually one of our less intensive uses that we have. These are, sand pits are a lot less intensive than a rock quarry. There's no blasting, and the dust situation is entirely different. So the other thing that always gets talked about is that the citizens come forward, and I understand their concern, rightfully so, that they're going to have a reduction in their property values. One of the great things about this location is that there's simply not a lot of residential properties that we have to deal with compared to other sites that we have. We have sites in more urban areas, oddly enough. Some of them are actually quarries. But one of the advantages to this site is that the number of homes that we bother is quite low for our industry. And so there are studies have been done about residences next to stone yards, next to quarries, and so forth and so on. This is a national study that we found. We didn't pay for this. We didn't fund it. It's just an organization that did their own, and the appraiser in this situation, he says that he can't find any evidence that rock quarries negate home prices. Well, that's fine. That's a national study. Big deal. We did our own study, and we have the advantage of having very robust appraiser information in Douglas County. Again, this is in your materials, but in Douglas County, we have several properties, residential properties, that actually adjoin our quarry. Their house, their property touches our property. Can't get any closer. And these are residences. And what we were able to do is go back in time and study how their appraisal moved over the last 5 years. And again, Big Springs is a much more intensive use than what we're asking for with this sand pit. And as you can see with these numbers, the appraisals over 5 years are all over 20%, which is fairly in line with what the rest of Douglas County was doing. So we're pretty confident that we're not going to move property values. When you can see here, a Big Springs quarry doesn't move the property values. We don't understand how a sand pit would move those values. Again, with the exception of 2 of these, 3 of these are all over 20% over the 5-year period. So, again, another thing that we want to talk about is how do we reclaim. This is a quarry pit in Franklin County, and as you can see, when the quarry operator was done with it, they walked away from it. They didn't have bonds on file with the county commission. They didn't have a contractual relationship with the landowner to the point where they had to reclaim it. This is how it looks like today. So we have enough quarries and we have enough activity that if we were really bad at reclaiming, that would actually hurt us when we go in front of county commissions and ask for their approval and ask for conditional use permits. So we actually are dedicated to how we reclaim. And we go so far as to even have a mission statement. One of the things about reclamation, though, is that, again, this is more quarries than sand pits, is that you have to be thinking about reclaiming before you ever even put a shovel in the ground. And here, like I said, we've already provided Randy with our reclamation. We'll have to do a whole nother set of reclamation plans with the state of Kansas. You'll have access to all of those. But in quarries, we actually reclaim as we open. So as we finish with 10 acres and then we open 10 acres, we'll be reclaiming that 10 acres. You'll see that here with the different phases. As we move on to another phase, the water pit will move with the phase. So it'll start in phase 1, but then it'll move over to 2 and 3, and then we'll be reclaiming behind that. Here, there's not a lot of topsoil. Even though it's an agricultural use, you can just literally see the sand. So what's topsoil is there, we will use as berms, and that's going to become important when we talk about how we're going to affect the water. But the berms will be used to protect the 2 neighbors. Then those berms, that's the topsoil that we'll use to reclaim behind us. So since the year 2012, 4 times we have won the Reclamation Award. Best in the state of Kansas is the other way to say it, and we just won it. So we're now currently the defending champions. So the other thing is that with those earlier reclamations, we didn't apply for this. The state of Kansas Department of Agriculture actually took our reclamations and they sent it in to the National Association of Reclamationists, and we won the World Series. We won the national award, I believe, in 2018 for those reclamations. So at one point in time, we were the national award winner as well. And when we won that, it was a big enough deal that we made page 1 of the Topeka Capital Journal, a very prestigious publication. And we also made the Journal World in Douglas County. And then here's a picture of that reclamation. This is again, Big Springs Quarry. So Big Springs Quarry, we control about 2,000 acres. So as you can see, it's got phases that are open and phases that have been reclaimed while still being an active quarry, but this is what it looks like today. So, water pollution, that didn't really come up at the Planning Commission meeting, but it's going to be an issue today. So, we have access to state maps, and the state maps tell us where the wells are and where the irrigation points are. This sand pit quarry is not ours. This is on Lower Silver Lake Road, 17th Street, north of the river. I believe it was originally a Myers permit. This sand operation has a conditional use permit from you. Okay? It's been in existence since the mid-2000s. And as you can see, there are several points there. Those points are one of two things, an actual water well or it's an irrigation point. Irrigation points are very important because it's also a hole drilled down to the water table. Here's the point about contamination. What are we bringing on site? Well, we're bringing a really big scoop shovel. We're not bringing on any hazardous materials. There's no asphaltic oil, nothing like that. There'll be diesel fuel there, but the diesel fuel will be behind a containment unit, right? Again, we have insurance for that, but we haven't had any spills. We've never had a claim made since 2004. So the only thing we're bringing on site, and it's very limited, is diesel fuel. We're not bringing on any other contaminants. So what are the main sources of pollution when we talk about the water table? It's agricultural runoff, right? Atrazine, herbicides, pesticides, fertilizer. We're actually taking our land out of agricultural production. We won't be putting down fertilizers. We won't be putting down herbicides. But guess what they do next to an irrigation well? All that agricultural products are put on next to those holes drilled down to the water table. I'm not going to tell you that we're safer than the irrigation well, but I don't see how we're not, because once we take this land, we're going to take it out of agricultural production. So the prime pollution problem that you're going to worry about is the agricultural runoff from our neighbors, not us. But I've already told you, we're berming. We're going to have berms between us and the two farms next to us. So I know there's going to be some communication about potential pollution to the water table, but I would like specifics about how we're going to do that, because I think we're actually going to be safer than what's happening now. So again, here's the picture of that existing 15-year-old sand pit. Here's the new one. Considerably less holes down to the water table. Again, to back up, and the new one. And then finally, again, with what we've talked about, our company culture is about safety. And right now, we got this last month. This was on the Bettis Asphalt side. Bettis Asphalt is much bigger than Mid-States Materials by many, many factors, but we won this award up to 400,000 hours with absolutely no work injuries. So I bring you that slide, although it's not technically super relevant, but this is our company culture. This is who we are. We do things in such a way that we apply for all the awards and we win them. So I think that's important to bring that to your attention. And with that, if you have anything else I will say this, I didn't touch much on the roads. We've met with the township. We have a good working relationship with the township. Big Springs Quarry is just to the south of of Highway 40. As a matter of fact, our haul road goes to Highway 40. So we have lots of material ready there. We're in talks with the township. We'll work with the township. I suspect that the township roads 5 years from now will be better than they are today. And I can tell you that because of what we did with 142nd Street in Jackson County. We put a brand new quarry in there 3 years ago. 142nd Street was the equivalent of a minimum maintenance road. Jackson County Commissioners will tell you that. That road is in much better condition today, much better. If you live on a dirt road, sometimes you actually will root for a quarry to come in because you'll get a better road before you're done. So, and you'll know 142nd Street because it's the exit before the casino. I know all three of you go there all the time, heavy users of the casino, but 142nd Street, that's that road. You'll see it before the on-ramp. The other thing I would like to add, and this is another reason, we can't have those roads being beat up because those trucks are very expensive. We buy brand-new trucks, we have state-of-the-art equipment, and with regards to the safety, the last thing I would like to add with that issue is that all of our trucks are GPSed. If somebody tells me the truck X did something, we have the ability to go back in time and tell you exactly how fast that truck was moving. All of our drivers have CDLs, they're professional, commercial drivers. The third-party trucking will have some there, but for the most part, the people that we deal with also have GPS on their trucks. So with that, if you have any other questions, I'll be glad to try to help you with them.
Questions for Mr. Eckert?
I do have a question. You said you bored the site, you had sand down to 50 feet. Would you anticipate going that deep with?
Well, if they do, I will no longer be with the company, I can tell you that. That 50 feet of sand and over 55 acres, of course, some of it we can't mine due to setbacks, that'll be the full 30 years of that permit. The problem you run into is the deeper you go, the bigger the sidewall problem becomes. So you're limited by how far you can go.
So the side slopes that you leave, you don't have any chance of that caving in?
Correct.
Yeah. I don't have any other questions.
Commissioner Cook, any questions?
Not yet.
Okay. I do have one. One of the conditions that was placed on this had to do with the hours of operation. This is on-site operations and truck traffic limited to 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday and on Saturdays between March through November, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And all other times are prohibited. I'm a little confused by the language that was in that about the March through November, and then the difference between 7 to 6 and 8 to 5. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, the March to November, that's when asphalt season is, right? If it gets too cold, we shut our the asphalt plants are down. So they're shut down from generally, we had a strange December where it was warm a couple weeks longer, but I think we generally shut those asphalt plants down, generally, don't hold me to this, first week of December. You haul your sand to your site in advance. So we might be asphalting in December, but we would have already hauled the sand there a couple weeks before that. So we don't have a problem with, the asphalt plants are simply down December through March, or to March. So that explains that. But a lot of our projects are increasingly, asphalt plants, they roll from sunup to sundown because we don't get 3 months to use them. So, and then we have rain days, heavy rain days in spring and early summer. So our jobs are generally, the major jobs, we'll start on March 1 and we'll have a plus or minus Thanksgiving end date. So that's kind of like where you see those times.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Eckert. Be prepared to come back up in a little bit.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
typically we would stand at an hour for a couple minutes. Rather than us standing for a couple minutes, why don't we take a 5-minute recess before we hear from oppositions, if that's permissible?
Okay. Yeah, that'd be fine. Let's just stand at ease.
Okay.
Instead of recessing officially, let's just stand at ease for 5 minutes. Give everybody a chance to use the restroom if they need to, or whatever. Okay.
We've got two of us from the township. Yeah.
Has it been about 5 minutes? Okay. Great. We will resume our public hearing. We'll move to opponent testimony. First, I just want to thank everybody for the decorum that we're seeing today. I think everybody's been pretty respectful so far, and I appreciate that. And I would expect it to continue that way. So first up, we've got Shad Halbert. Good morning.
My name is Shad Halbert. I am the general manager for Douglas County Rural Water District Number 3. A little background on that, just so you guys are aware. I don't know how we got our name, but we do actually serve two counties. We serve Shawnee County and Douglas County. We actually have more customers in Shawnee County than we do in Douglas County. We have two sources of water. One of them is our Big Springs Water Treatment Facility, which is a well plant that is on 2nd Street. We have another plant that is down south of Stoll that we pull water out of Clinton Lake. Originally, when the district was started, wells were put in up in that area in the early 70s. There was 2 wells put in and a plant put in, and that's what provided water to our district early on until the second plant was added in 81. In 2013, 2012, 2013, in that range, the district decided to modify and update the Big Springs facility. So there was a little over $7 million that was borrowed to put 5 brand new wells in and update the facility with reverse osmosis, new filtration to go in front of the reverse osmosis, state-of-the-art facility when we were done. So the patrons have made a significant investment in that facility and in that area for that long-term water source that we have. One of the other things that we have in that is we have a lot of water rights in that area that we have to perfect, and in order to perfect those, they take those based on how much water you can draw out of those wells in one given calendar year. We've yet to do that. We have to do that before 2027. We also are still paying on that, our patrons are still paying on that debt for that plan and will be until 2029. So if we were to lose that source of water, that's a significant impact, because the only thing that supports our district is the water we sell to our patrons based off of what the patrons pay. We don't have any other income other than that. So I'm not going to tell you that we know that this is going to pollute our wells, because we don't. Unfortunately, we just found out about it a couple weeks ago from the Planning Commission meeting. One of the persons that lives over in that area that knew me called me, wanted to know if I knew about it, which I did not. Apparently, because we were not in the 1,000 feet, we were not notified. We have not been notified by anybody to do with this. Therefore, we haven't had time to do any studies to see what long-term effects could be. Our wells are only 60 foot deep. People think a lot of times with wells are deep wells, because a lot of times wells are. The wells in that area are only 60 foot deep. The water level from the ground down is only, usually averages 10 foot. In the springtime when we get a lot of rains, I've seen the water level only be 6 foot down when we measure. We measure our wells constantly, record it. We measure them when they're running to try and figure out the drawdown on them, to make sure the wells are operating efficiently, that we don't have any problems with them. We also monitor the condition of the water we pull out of the wells on a regular basis, so that we can make sure that we're following all the rules, regulations, and everything that KDHE puts in place. Because of the number of patrons that we serve and the other districts that we sell water to, our facilities are considered Class 4 operated facilities, which means that in order to have operators operate them, you have to have the highest certification KDHE provides, which is a Class 4 because of the population. Between the water we serve to our patrons and to an adjacent district, Shawnee Rural Water District Number 8, that we sell water to, we figure somewhere around 11 to 12,000 patrons in southeast Shawnee County that we serve water to. People's lives that we touch every day. I mean, I try and tell my guys that work for me, every day that we run a water treatment plant, you're touching a lot of lives in one day because of the public health. And we take that very seriously. So, I wish I had better information to give you because we haven't had the time to do it. We haven't had the time to do the studies to see in other areas where this might have been put in, what it's done on the effects of the wells in the area, how much the wells in that area draw. Our wells are large wells. We draw, when we're running at full capacity, we pull 800 gallons a minute out of the ground. And most of that water comes from that top 20 foot. It comes from 10 foot down, or wherever the water level is, 20 foot down, the first 20 foot. That's where that water comes from the majority. We don't know what it's going to do. I'm not going to tell you that it is going to, because I don't know. We would like to, we would like to have done more studies and seen. I do know that in other areas where we've dealt with water well contamination, over on Southeast California, adjacent to Forbes Field, we were asked to come in and serve that area. We had to come to the county commission to have you add it to our area because the wells in that area were contaminated, and we had to get water to those people because the wells were never, they were told they were never going to be able to use them again. So usually when that happens, you can't go backwards. That's why we like to do the studies ahead of time, make sure everything is good ahead of time. But like I said, no one has reached out to us and even let us have a chance to be part of the planning, the environmental studies, anything. When we did find out about it, we tried to get information. Last I talked to my attorney, because he wasn't able to come this morning, the district's attorney, he's still trying to get information that he hasn't been able to get a hold of from the requested information from the planning committee meeting. Sorry. So, my board of directors and myself and the patrons of my district, that's why I'm here, is just for public concern of the possibility, the unknown, what we don't know. We haven't had a chance to study it. And the big investment we've made in that area. I did see on the map today, which is the first time I'd seen it, that it will be done in phases. And the third phase, which is the southeast corner of that property, is within 2,400 feet of one of our wells. So I mean, I understand it's not within 1,000 feet, but it is close proximity, and it is up what's considered to be upstream from the wells, which, if anything was to affect it, it's going to come from that direction, from upstream. So that's why I'm here, just to make you guys aware of our concern, the district's concern, and the investment we have in the area. And like I said, I can't tell you it's not going to contaminate it because I have no proof yet, but we haven't had time to gather. So, any questions?
I have a couple of questions. Have you heard of problems with pollution from sand pit or sand dredging operations like this?
I haven't heard of any, but I just started digging into it within the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
So and I'll just be honest with you. Mid-States is one of our customers. They're in my district. The Big Springs facility that they have is in my district, and we provide them with water. So I have no problem with their mining practices, or I'm sure that everything they do is, above board and stuff, and that they've done their due diligence. We have not done it. We haven't had the chance to do our due diligence. I wish they would have reached out to the district and said, we're going to be in the area where you have water wells. You provide public drinking water to southeast Shawnee County. Would you like to be a part of this so that we can figure it out? And until 2 weeks ago, I knew nothing of it.
Are your current wells, are they like in agricultural areas? Is that-
Correct.
Okay. You don't have any problems with the agriculture
No,
roundup?
we test for pesticides and fertilizers and all that. That's part of the routine testing we do now for KDHE.
If you were to do a study, how long would that take?
Honestly, I can't tell you. Like, it was in the initial stages. Our attorney was supposed to be here this morning. He couldn't cancel to do the presentation that I'm doing, and he couldn't cancel other prior commitments. So he may have more information than I have, but unfortunately, I couldn't get it from him.
Okay, that's all I have.
So, Sheb, were you at the rural water district when the Big Springs Quarry was initially started, or? I'm just kind of curious as to the process that one went through.
So I was with, are you talking about when Mid-States took it over or back when?
Yeah.
When it was initially started?
I'm just curious if your water district was involved with the conversations when that was
That,
built.
the water district, I think probably would have, I can't tell you for certain because I've only been the manager over there for 7, almost 8 years now.
Okay.
I worked for I worked for Shawnee 8 before that, the neighboring water district, for 15 years before I went to this district.
Okay.
So I mean, I was familiar with it because we got a master meter right across the street on 45th Street from their driveway. That's where the two districts separate.
Have there been any issues from that
None.
that you're aware of?
None at all.
Great, appreciate that.
None at all.
Any
Not
other
that I'm
questions?
aware of.
Just, I mean, you've already answered the question. You don't know how long it would take for you to do the.
I wish I had information to tell you that, but I don't. Like I said, we just found out 2 weeks ago. We're trying to reach out to get a hold, to find more information as to where there possibly could be, other places that had wells in areas of sand dredging operations so we could get viable information, and we just haven't. I just don't have anything to present.
So,
You stated that phase 3 is 2,400 feet from a well. How far away is phase 1?
I don't know because I didn't see that map until just today. As far as, it will be farther because our wells are to the south and east of the corner of that property. And I had not seen that map, so I don't have an accurate measurements to give you. It's going to add some distance to it.
Okay. I don't have anything else.
okay. My understanding is that regardless of what we do here today, that Kansas Department of Health and Environment has to review any kind of a water plan that comes along with it. Do you guys work along with them on that type of thing?
If asked to, yes. And
And
I
I
did,
assume-
I did, when I found out about this, I reached out to KDHE and I reached out to Kansas Water Office because we deal with them all the time.
Yeah.
And they told me right now they had nothing to tell me
Okay.
until something was actually applied for or done, which hasn't been, there was nothing to go over. This is the first
Okay.
step in that.
Okay.
So,
So we're not that far along yet then, is that what you're saying?
correct.
Okay, great.
Correct, yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you very much,
No,
Chad.
Thank you.
Next up, I've got Jennifer Vogelli, I hope, okay, sorry. I knew I was gonna butcher it when I read it, I was like, I'm gonna get it wrong. so-
It always happens. I'm Jennifer Vogelai. My husband Anthony and I actually own and live in the property right next to the sand pit that they're hoping to put in. We have 4 children there, and I'm not going to reiterate everything that we went over in the Planning Commission meeting that we both attended and both submitted comment for. Obviously, we are against it. I understand. That Bettis has laid out a plan of all of their hopes for what they're wanting to do to protect the environment, the area, and everything. And even if that all goes perfectly, it doesn't change the fact that we would have a sand pit as a neighbor and what that would do to our home. I understand that they said the values don't change, but I don't know about anybody else. But I don't want to live next to a sand pit. I can't imagine somebody else would want to live next to it either. We have 4 small children. Last I checked, there was no discussion of a fence going in around the area. The very little looking that I have done regarding that, it can be referred to as an attractive nuisance. There have been times, as I saw even just in Wichita, where children have snuck in and obviously gone to play in the pool and ended up drowning. So between the trucks, the openness to the big pond or lake or whatever it's going to be is attractive to kids. I've got a little boy who absolutely loves trucks. So to say that the trucks, whether it's 5 trucks or 20 trucks going up and down the road during the day, is a concern of mine. Obviously the dust, I know they said they would put some stuff down in front of our driveway, but if you've lived in Kansas, wind doesn't blow just one direction. And so I just have concerns that even if it's in front of our driveway, you still have that entire roadway where as they're driving, the dust will be kicked up and blown around too. Again, I know I'm not gonna have any fancy presentations. I have nothing to counterpoint everything. It's just my livelihood. And the environment that we were hoping to raise our children in is changing very drastically, very quickly, it seems like. So I just came here to say, this is our family, please take it into consideration because we have our home invested there. We have fruit trees, gardens, everything. We had a lot planned for that area, and it's just been really hard to kind of watch and go through this. So I just hope that you can take it into consideration. and know that we are against it. So, thank you.
I appreciate that. Any questions for Jennifer?
No.
All right, thank you very
Thanks.
much. Next up, we have Mike Meyer.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
You know, I just listened and heard that this was going to be in a rural area, this truck route. This truck route, where it starts and where it ends at Highway 40, goes by 39 residential properties. Prior to Shadden Road and 2nd Street on East in Shawnee County, there's going to be another 7 residential properties affected. In Douglas County that utilize 2nd Street going to the west, there's dozens of those. And the people that own the river sites just adjacent north of this proposed site, they're going to lose that serenity from that also. Excuse me, I'm going to have to read some of my notes here. First thing, I guess, large trucks, 6 days a week for 30 years. I know they're wanting to cheapen up everything at the expense of our community. That's what it's going to cost. We're going to pay the cost of those trucks and that sand pit. Do you know that the Kansas River system, the drainage basin of the Kansas River, takes up most of the northern half of Kansas, 36,000 square miles. 11,000 square miles drains from Nebraska south into the Kansas River Basin, and 6,000 square miles of Colorado drains into the Kansas River Basin. A total of over 34 million acres, or near 34 million acres, drains into that Kansas River Basin. The floods of 51, the flood of 93, in 1973 there was more rainfall in Kansas than there was in 93, just under 1951. Generally speaking, those floods happen in the May, June, and July time period, right after people have fertilized their yards, farmers and ranchers have fertilized their crops, and when you have heavy rainfall, it leaches and goes into the river basin. A lot of the nitrates and phosphates follow through. Now, in the Topeka, what I call the Topeka corridor, where the levees go through Topeka, I would estimate that at least 2/3 of that basin goes through the Topeka corridor when we have those heavy flooding events. We have the nitrates and the phosphates coming down through there. Yeah, you know, once the levees open up east of Topeka, we have right there at Tecumseh, there's a high ridge, kind of protects most of the town of Tecumseh. And do you know where it opens up at when the floodwaters open up? You'll never guess, would you? First off, it opens up on my property, which I'm about a half a mile east of this proposed site. And then it opens up on this proposed site. And if you wouldn't mind, I have some pictures of the 93 flood that I'd like to, I don't have the, things really got fancy since the last time I was here. But, so I just have some pictures to hand each of you commissioners. If you see the, I'll give you each one. This is prior to the 93 flood initially. If you see the red marks, hopefully you can still see them on there. That's where the proposed site is. This is approximately May of 1993, or 98, yeah, 93.
Mike,
Is
you
when
need to
this
be
was
at the-
taken.
otherwise you won't be recorded. Thank you.
Those pictures were taken, aerial photos of May of 1993. My property, where I lived there, is shown in the house and fields there. And if you look at where those little red lines are, is where the proposed site is. Now I'm going to give you some pictures of July of 1993. It's not where the high water mark is. the river has not reached its maximum yet, because if you look down where the wells are from the water district right now, they're still green showing. When the maximum part of the river, when the maximum height of the river got there was no green showing. I actually rode across the railroad tracks. It was about 2 feet deep there, and rode across the railroad tracks to get to our house. And of course, our house was underwater. And so anyway, I just want to show you a little bit of what the river can do. Now the next picture is, this is going to show our youngest son in 1993. He's standing in front of, on Cripey Road, and everything you see to the, everything you see to the to his right or to the left of that picture, that is the proposed site that they're talking about. That is the river starting to come up, and that is where the site is. So in my estimation, you can't find a more unacceptable place to put a open sand pit. All this land in here is so fragile, so sandy. I don't care what kind of berm they build, if they using the same soil from this property, that water is going to wash it out so fast. You can put all the riffraff you want to along that bank, and that's going to do squat. I've witnessed the power of that river firsthand, and that is not going to accomplish anything. Mr. Eckert indicated that the groundwater, they're going to make it safer because there's not going to be any agricultural chemicals around. Well, somebody who grew up on the farm all his life and sold seed most of his life and did everything, most of the chemicals now put on farm fields are mostly contact chemicals. You don't see much insecticide because the GMO crops have the insecticide built right into the seed. You don't see no insecticide. Yeah, there will be some herbicide and sometimes some fungicide, but as far as pollution goes, it's not going to come from farm fields. It's going to come downstream from that river with the nitrates and the phosphates. When it hits the Kansas River, it hits the Missouri River, and then it hits down to the Mississippi. And this is why the Mississippi Delta has so much dead fish. The actuaries are just literally dying because of the nitrates and the phosphates that run off of these fields. And this is going to go, the next flood event's going to come right through there. We had 1951, we have 1993, but in 1973, we had more rain in 1973 through the state of Kansas than we had in 1993. And so I beg you, there's got to be a better place for them to get sand. I beg you. Now, this next picture is going to be the aftermath of what Chad was talking about on the rural water district. This is an old well. That is an old well, or one of the wells that they had there. This was after the flood of '93. Where their wells sit on the south side of the tracks, the water stood there in '93 probably for weeks. The stench was unbearable. Now, once you got on the north side of the tracks where actually the river drained through, it was unbelievable. There wasn't much stench because the water kept moving. There, the water stagnates. And I'll tell you what, if there's any possibility of a well being contaminated on the next event, it's there. In about the next, almost every 20 to 30 years, we have a major event. And this is something that I think you need to consider. Whether we can save a few bucks for some corporation, or we can retain what this community has. And I beg you to vote no on this proposal because of the health and the safety of our community. Thank you very much. Or you have any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Meyer?
Couple questions. Mr. Meyer, now, when there's a flooding event, the environmental impact from the agriculture, I mean, it's going to be wiping anything that's on the farms, chemicals down the river too.
You bet. You bet. In 93, barrels, oil, everything came down that river.
And now this applicant is indicated that he's just going to be dredging. The only chemicals they're going to be having on site are going to be the diesel fuel, of which they would have it locked up.
Yeah, that's very, yeah, they probably can contain that, but are they going to contain when the next flood event happens? I doubt it.
And so when the flooding event happens, what concern specifically do you have that the sand pit is going to move sand down the river?
No, the nitrates and the phosphates are going to go into that hole. Anything floating downstream, whether it's in 93, there was plenty of things floating downstream, including dead animals, that could enter that pit. I just can't imagine a worse place to have an open sand pit than in the floodway. And where I used to live, I mean, I still own property right there. In fact, I probably have what I always call beachfront property. I mean, my wife and I just went down there yesterday, and there was 4 swans in that, right there, right there next to the river on our sandbar. I hadn't seen swans in years. We have pelicans in September. We have eagles flying everywhere. You know, the environment there is so pristine. On my property, where I say the flood comes up first, I have rye planted there. I have a cover crop all the time. I have planted willows. In fact, where he's indicating they want to put this this concrete slabs and everything to retain the riverbank, probably the best thing you can do is get willows and start planting them along there. I've got willows out the yin-yang, and they'd be welcome to come and cut the willows and anybody along there to retain that riverbank, the structure of it. In 93, right west of where that property is, I own some property west of there, maybe less than a quarter of a mile. There was an old levee there. It's not there no more. The river has eaten off so much ground there. Where I own property now, I'm on the low side of the river. I probably have gained 10 to 20 acres, and everybody on the high side of the river, I can look right across that bank, and that bank is eroding daily. And where this proposed site is, they're on the high side of the riverbank. It's gonna lose, and actually, we could change the course of the river. Any excavation on that property, and the next flood that comes through, all along Cripey Road heading to the east, is light sandy soil. It could easily change the channel of that river. And I would pray that they have liability insurance for that type of situation too, because we're due for another flood. I mean, our timeline is coming up here in the next 5 to 10 years possibly. So only the Lord knows when that river's going to happen, when it's going to get out of its bank, and he sure hasn't told me anything about it. But I pray that you take the safety and consideration of that in play, because it's a real possibility on the next flood event, and there's nothing that company can do to prevent it. Any other questions?
No.
I just, I guess all of the things you're saying are real concerns with flooding, but I don't understand how this particular project makes any of that worse.
Because they're going to have an open pit. If they were next to the river taking sand, I don't see a problem doing that. Even though they're on the high side, they'd have to burrow down 20 feet to get to the river right now. But when you have an open pit where the river can come through and actually excavate more out, that's what I'm talking about, is the power of that river. There's nothing they can do. They can put all the berms up and everything else. The power of that river will do whatever it wants. And that's when the nitrates and I probably shouldn't say this, but I actually have a patent on a machine that actually injects sludge, city wastewater treatment plant sludge, manures and everything. It's being marketed right now. And the whole idea is to keep the nitrates and the phosphates from runoffs, keep the smell inside the soil where the plant roots need it. I've done a lot of study on this, and my God, when that river comes up, you don't know what's coming down. And you have an open pit, it could contaminate it so easily. And if they was next to the river, I don't see a problem, but not where they're at.
Any other questions? No. All right. Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Next up, we have Joe Cripey.
Have somebody else go first.
Okay.
Anybody else on there?
Sure. Gary Gilbert.
Good morning. I'm Gary Gilbert, and I own several parcels along Highway 40 and been part of the Tecumseh community for over 50 years. And the proposed route, truck route to get the sand out of there, that may be the best route to use if they're staying on the south side of the river. But I'm sure there's going to be some sand purchased by other entities, counties, townships, what have you, that's going to go across the river. And the most direct way for them to go across the river is going to be through the town of Tecumseh on 2nd Street to Goodell Road to Seward, and then get on the Oakland Expressway or Highway 4 to get across the river. So I think that's something that needs to be considered, not only as far as the roadway is concerned, but as far as the town of Tecumseh is concerned. And the other thing is, it's difficult, damn difficult, to accept the fact that this community is going to be interrupted. It's been a quiet rural community forever. And this is going to change the whole picture of that community. And if either one of you had that going on in your individual community, you would have the same feelings I do and many of the other people that are here. I'm going to tell you, if the people in Tecumseh really knew what was going on, and they haven't, there wouldn't be many people here in favor of that project. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Gilbert?
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. All right. Mr. Cripey?
Joe Cripey. I live right there at the corner of 2nd and Shadden Road. My great-great-grandfather settled in this part of the state over 160 years ago. That whole basin where this thing is, where this pit is designed to be in, was a swamp back then. And he hand dug a ditch to drain that to make it good fertile farm ground. The actual proposed site was Uncle Albert's farm, and the flood of '51 destroyed it, took it out, took all the topsoil out, and it was one of the highest producing farms, most fertile farms in the whole Kansas River Valley. When the '51 flood came through, it took out all the topsoil and deposited sand there. There hasn't been a viable farming operation on that property since '51. My relatives took over 6 to 8 feet of sand off of the top of that to try and find topsoil, and then when they dug down and dug into the well, they couldn't find any topsoil left. So that ground has been out of production since '51. They said the flood of '51 was a flood that only happens once every 50 years or 300 years. That's what the experts say. 73, 93, 95, all had floods. And then you also had a picture up here earlier in the presentation of that railroad crossing. On the south side of that railroad crossing, whenever we get 2 inches of rain, that road floods. There's water runs across that road. From Cripey Road, from the end of Shadden Road, where Cripey Road attaches to Shadden Road and goes east from there, In the flood of 93, they had 2 sinkholes that came in there, and they dumped well over 20 truckloads of riprap in there to fill up the holes that were caused by the flood. That area has been known throughout my whole family's existence down there to be prone, when you have high water, is prone to quicksand. That road is not designed for heavy truck traffic. It gets wet, it gets soggy, and I can remember going down there in 93 and standing on it, and it would bounce up and down like a water bed. And you had to be careful where you walked, because if you got off of that road, because the road is compacted and has gravel on it, if you didn't step in the right place, you'd be in quicksand very easily. I'm against this, not so much for I don't like the idea of them hauling the sand out of there, because like was stated earlier, all the experts said in the 51 flood that if the Santa Fe Railroad parked their locomotives on the railroad bridge there in North Topeka, that it would hold the bridge. They lost 7 locomotives when that bridge went, and they have never found any of them. They're gone. They're buried somewhere. So that river's going to do what it's going to do. So we had floods in 73, 93, 95, 51. All of those were said to be 300-year events. I'm not real good with math, but it doesn't seem like there's 300 years in between those things. That river is going to flood. That is what is going to happen. If you have a big hole in the ground there, 300 feet from the edge of the river, I think was said by the experts, that water's going to churn, and it's going to blow out that berm. I stood on the riverbank in 93 and watched the other side, the high side of the river, lose quarter-mile stretches of frontage along the river, 10 and 20 and 30 feet into the property line, until it moved the river over 100 yards to the north. That river has widened way out since it was from when I was growing up, and it moved way to the north. I'm sure you guys have all seen pictures of glaciers falling off into the ocean. That's what it looked like, but that was soil. That was farm ground that was gone. It wiped out sections of trees and stuff. So when the power of water is probably the most powerful force on the planet. And the river's going to do what it's going to do. And if you notice in those pictures there, one of those pictures shows what happened after the 93 flood. You can see a line of sand sandy ground that's going across there. Where do you think that river's going to go? It's going to take the path of least resistance. You have a big open pit there filled with water. When that berm goes out, and it will go out, it's going to cut right through there, and it's going to continue going on downstream in that same general direction that you see the sand spread out there. And that's headed right towards those water wells for the Douglas County District. That's where that sand heads, right directly at them. So it's going to cut down through there, and it's going to cut down most likely clear to the railroad embankment. The truck traffic. They estimate 20 or so trucks a day from just Bettis. I don't think that they're going to restrict their sales of sand to just Bettis trucks hauling it. I would imagine they'll probably sell it to anybody that wants sand and has a truck that comes out there. My house is right on the corner of that one slide that they showed of the house that's on the corner. That's my house. They go 50 feet in front of my front door. I don't know if any of you guys live on gravel roads, but dust doesn't just start here and stay right here. When you have a truck that's going 30 miles an hour, probably coming up Shadden Road towards my house, the truck pulls that dust along. So 100 feet of dust amelioration, or whatever you called it, abatement, is not going to be near enough to lessen the amount of dust that I'm going to have to deal with all the time. Because these guys, when the farmers harvest the crops there every year, for about a week, it's very uncomfortable to go outside because of the dust, because the amount of traffic goes through there. And they run maybe 10, 12 trucks a day hauling grain out of there. That's only for about a week's time, and that's easy to deal with. Sand is made of silica. That road that's there is a sandy, real sandy road, and when they come, you have a lot of silicates that are imparted into the air. Silicates ingested into your lungs causes silicosis. I don't know if any of you know anybody that's died of that. I have. I used to work for the railroad, and I know some guys that had breathing silica dust causes silicosis, which is very much like emphysema. It's a very slow, painful death that happens. You're going to have a lot of air pollution from these guys driving these trucks up that gravel road that I'm going to have to deal with, that I'm going to be there constantly. I have a swimming pool in my backyard that I allow several daycares to bring their children out throughout the week in the summertime to have use of the pool so that they can take care of their kids and whatnot. So you're going to have excess traffic coming by there with these large trucks going by. It's going to be noise pollution. It's going to be the pollution from their diesel exhaust coming up to the stop sign, stopping and accelerating again, getting that big puff of black smoke out while they turn the corner on my property and hit 2nd Street and go down the road there. So 6 days a week, I'm going to have to deal with these trucks coming by constantly, all day long, spewing out the diesel smoke. Nothing has been mentioned about the noise pollution. I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever been around a diesel when it takes off from a stop sign going uphill, they're loud. They put out a lot of black smoke and make a lot of noise. And they that dust doesn't settle immediately. It takes 5 to 10 minutes for that dust to come down out of the air. So if you're having 20 trucks a day for 8 hours a day or so, you're looking at a couple of hours worth of dust every day that's going to be constantly just in the air, and that doesn't mention just dealing with it. Also, if nothing else, I would like to see it, if you're going to pass this thing or approve this request, to cut out Saturday. These guys you already heard from their expert that they can afford to be shut down for a day. Saturday and Sunday is the days off. And I have people that come out, I have relatives, I have a ton of relatives that come out, and generally they can only come out on the weekends. So we're going to have people out there on Saturdays, and we're going to have to be dealing with these trucks going by all the time, spewing up the dust, noise pollution, the danger of the traffic to little children, because they run around. You can't, they're going to run around. The railroad traffic said, yeah, it's going to be, a couple hours. Well, they park there for days at a time, not just hours at a time, and block that traffic. And you're not going to, I don't really expect to see a truck that gets down there and gets trapped by the train taking the alternate route around. I'm sure they're going to do that. They're not going to just stick that one road and be trapped down there for hours and days at a time. They're going to find a way to get out of there. Truckers don't make any money if they're not moving. So they're going to move. They're going to take an alternate route out of there. When they were building the magnet schools here in Topeka, one of my neighbors from down the road had a unique type of clay on his property. And he had a contract where they were mining the clay to fill in the foundations around the magnet schools when they were building them. Within 2 weeks of them starting that, the truck traffic was similar to what would be happening with this sand operation, destroyed 2nd Street. It's a chip and seal road. Chip and seal roads are not designed for heavy truck traffic. And the presentation that was made said that the township only maintains that road once a year. Well, that's false. They grade the road grader comes down there about every other month, sometimes more if the weather dictates. They put gravel on at least twice a year since I've lived there. And let me see, my family's lived in that place. My house was built in 1903. So they've been putting gravel down there on that road since 1903. So I have a little bit of experience with what goes on out there. This is going to be detrimental to the health and not only mental health, but physical health could possibly have this dust abatement doesn't work real well. I just don't see any real upside to it other than a large corporation being able to make a bunch of money at the expense of the livelihood. That dust will change the pH of the soil. I have approximately a half mile of frontage along the gravel road there, and the dust goes out about 100 feet or more into the field. It's going to change the pH of that. It lowers the productivity because when crops are covered with dust, they don't produce as well. So we have the change in the environment, the change in the air quality out there, the change in the noise pollution, the danger of truck traffic. So I think there's something to be said for quality of life, you know, and it's going to reduce the quality of my life, having all of this traffic, especially coming by there. The pit itself won't bother me nearly as much in the short term, maybe long term, I don't know, you know. Yeah, I'm against having this here. And if nothing else, if you guys are going to go ahead and approve it, I would request that you shorten it and give us a weekend. Give us both Saturday and Sunday where they don't run. They already said they can get by without having it, you know, a day or so here and there without production. Why not? 2 days a week. Let us have some peace and quiet. They said they can survive without it. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Cripey? No? Okay, that's the last person signed up for public comment in opposition. Did we have any more questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I might ask if we just let the applicant respond.
Okay, sure.
Thank you, Commissioners. You know, we run a lot of quarries, and quarries are a much more intensive use than a sand pit. And in all those quarries, we have lots of neighbors. And if we are a bad corporate actor, we don't get CUPs. One of the things that I make, and when I argue internally at our company, one of the things that we're proud of is how we interact with the public and the neighbors. Most neighbors don't want us there. We know that. But we still have to be good corporate citizens because all the county commissioners, you have a convention, we know that you talk. If I have a bad reputation in Osage County, it's going to carry over to Shawnee County. So we're pretty good at being responsible to our responsibilities with the neighbors that are on these haul routes. So we've been talking on Saturdays, we're willing to shut down at noon. Change the CUP, we'll shut down at noon. I tell you what, we won't run the dredge on Saturdays. We'll shut the dredge down. We would like to be, and by the way, I'm going to tell you right now, we're not going to run every Saturday. We'll run on Saturdays where there's a particular job, a KDOT job, a particular Shawnee County or City of Topeka job that'll require it. But Saturdays is not an everyday thing, but we'll take that limitation on those Saturdays. With respect to the water and the contamination, I didn't hear anybody say what we were going to do to cause the contamination. Commissioner Meyer, who knows far more about agriculture than I will ever understand, makes a good point about the contact chemicals. That's great. That actually makes our point. Good. That'll be less runoff for everybody. With regards to nitrates and phosphates, how is our use going to contribute to that? We don't use those chemicals. Those are excess chemicals being used by other actors. Why would we be penalized for doing something legal and not contributing to nitrates and phosphates, I think legally in the zoning world, how does our use contribute to that? In regards to the pits, if you just get on Google Maps and start at Junction City and head towards the Missouri River, there are sand pits everywhere. You've got one that's a much bigger issue than ours ever will be, the Lessman pits. Look at the Lessman pits. Those things are right on the river. There's no 350 feet there. They're like 50 feet. That's a far bigger issue than ours. But there are sand pits in Douglas County, Johnson County. They're everywhere. Sand pits are actually the primary source of sand production in the state of Kansas. Wichita's full of sand pits, but we're talking about Kansas River today. There's very few on-the-river permits granted by the Corps of Engineers. If that was the only sand that we could get, we wouldn't have economic development, not the way it is now. There's not enough on-sand river production to do that. But just look at especially eastern Johnson County, full of sand pits on the river, much less than 350 feet. Water wells everywhere. So I don't know why this one is a particular issue. Here, we're thousands of feet away, thousands. And I will say this, we also have to get water rights. So we have to have this entire conversation with the Department of Agriculture at the state of Kansas. If we invite the Rural Water District to be part of that conversation. Just because you give the CUP today doesn't mean that the water rights issue goes away. It's going to be an issue at the Department of Agriculture, and I'm going to suggest to you that's actually the proper forum. They're experts. Let's let them make that determination. Yes, when I talk about an armored bank, that's not going to do much against a 100-year flood. That's a fact. But that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of that flood is the armored bank is the gradual erosion. With regards to a massive flood, all of our equipment's portable. It's all on wheels. We'll get it out. It won't be there by the time the flood hits that piece of land. So I don't want to get bogged down into the flood of 1993 because we won't be there by the time that kind of flood hits that land. The diesel fuel, everything is all on wheels. We'll be able to get that dredge out. The Bettis Companies employs about 1,000 people, of which I would suggest at least 800 of them live in this county. If we have a situation where we have to pull that dredge out, we'll have the manpower to get that done. Again, with respect to the haul route, we talk to that township all the time. We have a good relationship with the township. They were welcome to come to this meeting today. We will be improving that road. It's just a matter of fact. We'll have to. So, again, that rock will come from our Big Springs Quarry, which brings up this. I'm very sensitive to what Mr. Cripey said, but the dust that he's getting is coming off that limestone. It's coming off the rock from Big Springs. There's no silica in that dust. So our gravel is not going to be causing that sort of an issue. So I just wanted to make that. Other than that, I'll have any other questions that you might have. Other than respect to a quiet neighborhood, I would say we're simply using the haul route that Westar and the cellophane plant, part of it, already established. Our use is going to be less intensive than that cellophane plant and certainly much less than a coal energy plant. So I understand in these situations where our use, we're getting, there's a discussion today about it, but I'm pointing out that our use is still less intensive of the two uses that have been there for years and years and decades.
Any questions for Mr. Eckert?
I have a question. It was brought up that, would you be selling sand to individuals, or is this mainly just for your use? Or?
Well, we do that at Yuri, and even with all the third-party purchases and trucking, our daily use is still under 20 units a day, 20 loads a day.
Commissioner Cook?
Mr. Eckert, I believe that if I understood Commissioner Myers correctly, his point was that as you dig the pit, if there is a flood, taking all these phosphates, the phosphates are going to be dumped into the pit, which then gives it easier access to the groundwater. And I think that's where his point was, that you're creating an opening for the groundwater contamination. And if I understand you correctly, this is something you believe would be best brought up with the Kansas Department of water, and they would control what water impacts are.
Correct.
Okay. And that is a separate licensing and permitting process.
Correct.
Okay. And then, as far as the train traffic, this is something you're already familiar with, and that the trains can obstruct your hauls.
That's our risk.
I don't believe that I had other questions. Fencing around the site. Ms. Vogelai brought up whether or not there would be any fencing or restriction.
Well, other than the berms, no.
Okay. And the reason for that is just because of its isolated nature, or just in general?
I mean, we have some fencing in our quarries, but they're usually for cattle reasons. I mean, we literally have cattle that are right next to where we're blasting. Doesn't seem to bother the cattle that much, oddly enough. But there's not a lot of livestock in this area, so fencing's not something that we really put into our plans.
And did you have any plans for phase 2 or 3 for the unused land? Is it just going to be sitting fallow, or?
It's still, the unused land is still controlled by the landowner. So we'll have conversations with the landowner about what he intends to do down the road.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Eckert, just to speak on the fencing portion of that again, I mean, it is a pretty close proximity to that western neighbor. Would you guys be opposed to putting a fence, a short fence, to at least block their property, just at the front of the property there?
If you make it a condition of the CUP, we'll do it.
Okay.
Our traditional fencing is barbed wire. I mean, I want everybody to understand that. When we do fencing, we do a 5-strand barbed wire. So that's pretty typical in Kansas fencing, I would imagine.
Well, I think most folks in rural areas are accustomed to seeing barbed wire.
Correct. I just want to get it out there.
Any further questions?
No.
Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Eckert.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
It is my understanding that there is a representative from the Tecumseh Township present. I don't know if...
You're one step ahead of me.
Okay.
I was just going to mention that. So if there's any questions for the township, now would be a good time to ask them.
if we could have the township come up just to address the issues of the traffic impact.
Good morning, Commissioners. Steve Hennessy, trustee of Tecumseh Township. But I will acknowledge that the representatives from Bettis came to our meeting 3 or 4 months ago. So we've been aware of what their plans are. They've kept us informed. Those roads are very narrow and not designed for truck traffic, but they realize that, and they've agreed that they will help us maintain them and work with us on that. We do have another road over at the big Springs Quarry where they cross, and they've been real good to work there if we've had issues. As far as the traffic implementation deal, whatever, for TIP, I think it was called, we haven't heard anything about that yet, so.
Okay.
I don't have any other questions.
Well, so have you guys been, I mean, you mentioned you've worked with Bettis in the past. I mean, can you speak to like what kinds of improvements they made to the roadway for the Big Springs Quarry?
Well, the only issue we've had over there is where they cross our road, I think twice, if I remember right. Sometimes it just gets a big hump or a little rough, and if they don't notice it, we contact them and they're right out there to take care of it.
Okay, and so Bettis does the work themselves. They're not
Correct.
expecting you to fix the problems.
Yeah.
And,
If it's on our road, we do, but where they cross it, they normally take care of it.
okay. Any other questions for the township? Okay,
Thanks.
thank you very much. All right. I believe that'll end the public hearing. Is there a motion? I'll make the motion to end the public hearing, and then we'll have discussion.
Second.
Okay, so motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Rippon. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. All right, now we'll have discussion. Is there anyone Any comments?
Mr. Chairman, if we can have Mr. Anderson come up regarding these proposed amendments to this conditional use permit. Are there any issues or objections by the planning department on having the dredge not operate on Saturdays and having the truck traffic stop at noon on Saturdays?
None. We have no question, no concerns about that at all.
And as to the fence issue on the front of the property, I think that's, Mr. Chairman, what you had suggested.
Yeah. If it's welcomed by the neighbor who I think had left already, so I would assume that Bettis would be in contact with her.
I've only got one question about that. I'm looking at the site plan. You're talking about just on the front of the property or?
What I'm talking
Kind
about,
of wraparound.
yeah, just on the west edge.
Just on the west side.
I mean, to keep wandering children from the plant.
No, that'd be an appropriate condition.
And then you would have that added to the conditional use permit?
Yes, sir. We would redraft the resolution and get that to the clerk.
And then I would just ask Mr. Anderson, do you have any other, having heard the statements given today by the individuals, any other changes or amendments to the conditional use permit?
I would point out one thing, and Rich, you can jump in. I think they, let's see, condition 2D.
Next slide.
Oh, yeah. We mentioned that in the second bullet that we mentioned riprap would be the appropriate material. They also wanted to include concrete rubble as another option. That's actually been the preferred option that the Public Works Department has been pressing for. So we would amend that to say riprap and or concrete rubble.
Randy, is that riprap on their property, or is it on the bank of the river, or what?
No, it's just on their property.
On their property, okay.
Yeah.
Any other changes to the 24 conditions?
No, sir. I guess, so that it'd be those 24 and then 2 additional ones would be 26. It include the fencing and the, actually, it would be 25. We would change condition number 5. So it would prohibit Saturdays after noon.
Yep.
So it'd be 25 conditions.
Okay, Randy, just to clarify, so theoretically, if we were to pass this today with these conditions, several of the conditions here that would address some of the concerns is that they'd have to have a Class A drainage plan by the county engineer.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have to have approval of a traffic impact analysis by the county engineer in Tecumseh Township. They'd have to have a floodplain development permit from the planning department. And then they also have to have airborne dust controlled in compliance with KDHE and the EPA.
Correct.
Okay, so then we're also talking about possibly limiting the hours of operation a little bit more than they already are. And we're also talking about constructing a fence on the western edge of the property. I mean, we'd have to probably set a distance, because I don't think it makes sense to go the entire length of the property, but is that?
You would just set it for the length of phase 1.
Okay, yes, that'll work. The length of phase 1 on the western edge.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson, on item 1D, all required permits and licenses from the state and federal agency with jurisdiction and provide copies to each Shawnee County Planning Department. That would be anything that would be like the water issues.
Yes, sir. We actually cover that in 2 places. I think it's condition number 9 covers KDHE and regulations. Let's see, read through all these things. here, we talk about the State Conservation Commission being involved. They are all those agencies are all cited in these conditions of
But the
approval.
issues raised by the Rural Water District number 3 of Douglas County, that would be covered by 1D?
1D, yes, sir. And we would have to have copies of all the letters of approval or any comments say it was approved condition to these things. We want copies of those for the file.
On the hours of operation, what was your proposal there? Could you repeat that just to?
Well, it was what Mr. Eckert had said, there would be no dredging on Saturday, and that the truck traffic would stop at noon on Sunday, or Saturday.
I think the concern on Saturdays was more the truck traffic than the dredging. If I had to guess,
I was just
so,
reciting what was stated by Mr. Eckert.
okay.
You want to clarify? Okay.
Okay, so I misinterpreted that, sorry about that. I would say that perhaps we limit the truck traffic to 8 AM to 6 PM instead of 7. I think that would address some of the concerns, maybe kids waiting on the bus in the mornings, they would be all gone by 8 o'clock when the truck traffic started, so on Monday through Friday.
So number 1, or number 5 would be 7, or would be 8 AM to when?
To 6 PM Monday through Friday, and then Saturdays from 8 to noon, is that what we're?
Commissioner Rippon?
What time do they pick kids up on? I've been out of that arena for a few years.
Most kids are gone by 8 AM.
8 a.m. Mr. Eckert, what are your hours on your other?
There are no hours on the other one.
There are no hours.
Yes, needed.
I see.
During the summer months, you're not going to have kids waiting on the school bus, though.
That's true.
That's true.
So,
If you were to limit it, then August through May, that would cover your school year. And then from June through the months of June and July, I mean, and usually we're back to school middle of August now.
Or you can just say during school days,
During the school year,
during the school year. That'd be all right.
will we need to specify Shawnee Heights School District? Because I believe
yes,
that's.
if we could, that would be the school year as defined by Shawnee Heights School District.
That would probably be the thing to do.
Okay. All right. Any other?
Mr. Chairman, I do note that Mr. Gilbert seems to be raising his hand.
Yeah, hold on just a second. It's not customary typically to just hop up. I'll allow it, but you please come to the microphone and state your name before we start.
I don't have any children of school age, but if the school age is, were school children and the buses are an issue, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, those kids have to come home too from school. And so if that's an issue, then what do we do about the kids coming home from school?
Well, I'll speak to that because I do have school-age children that ride a bus in the morning and in the afternoon. Typically in the morning, they'll go down and stand at the end of the street for a while waiting on the bus, and in the afternoon, the bus drops them off. They typically head straight to the house, and so they're not really hanging out by the roadway in the afternoons the way they are in the mornings. So,
And one other thing I could bring up is this sale of sand to third parties, and then them actually going through the town of Tecumseh, not south to DuPont Road, but heading farther east on Second Street to catch the K4 going over the
West.
river. Yeah,
West.
yeah, excuse me. At any rate, that doesn't, apparently, that didn't ring a bell.
I believe that is a condition of the application, that they are only allowed to use the designated route. Any deviation from that, if somebody were to see one of their trucks doing that, they could report that to us, and it would be cause for, I mean, it's a violation of the contract, of the conditional use permit.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that what Mr. Gilbert is raising, that if Midwest signs, if they sell to XYZ Trucking wouldn't be restricted by the route. And that's what Mr. Gilbert is raising, is that XYZ
Okay.
Trucking is going to be driving through Tecumseh or down Second Street to catch the Oakland Expressway.
That's right.
Okay.
And I
appreciate
believe that the information provided by the applicant is that it's very few outside third-party vendors. It's not something that they do a lot of third-party sales to, if I understood Mr. Eckert's statements, based on his Urish.
Could you come to the microphone, please?
We've upgraded technology since you were here, Mr. Eckert.
Everybody's upgraded everything since I've been gone. We also do a good job of educating. We educate what the haul route is. This isn't the first time that we'll have a dedicated haul route. We worked with this before. I think Big Springs actually has, we have a rule. That's why there's an internal haul road. So we do a very good job of educating our third-party contractors of what the haul route is and what they can't do. The only thing I might add is that there might be somebody in Tecumseh who orders sand. I mean, you know, if someone has a dedicated order for themselves inside that haul route, obviously I think that would be okay. But we might even put an internal sign up with the haul route map. But no, we'll educate everyone what the haul route is. And like I said earlier, our trucks are GPSed. So if somebody has a complaint, we're a couple clicks away from figuring out what that truck did, and then a stern lecture will ensue. And quite frankly, most of the third-party trucks are GPS now, too, is what we're finding.
What percentage of, I mean, obviously you don't know an exact number, but I mean, of the trucks that'll be coming from this plant, in comparison to the current plant out on Urish, you know, what percentage are yours versus third parties?
Well in excess of 80 they're ours, if probably not even 90. It's a lot of ours.
Okay. And could you point me, where in here does it limit the number of trucks per day?
It does not.
There's not a limitation.
We have some history on that, on truck trips. The Valencia pit had truck trips on it, and they've gone out of business. The thing about construction is, you might not have 5 trips in the month of January, but you're going to have a couple in August, right? That's when you have, so it's really hard to do. It's hard to calculate, to put a cap on that. It's almost impossible.
Commissioner Mays, and I don't know that either you or Commissioner Rippon have been here when the Valencia site comes up for annual renewal. But originally, Valencia was limited on the number of trucks, and they had just this issue where they would have months of no activity and then months where they needed more than what the limitation was. They had asked to bank it. They had asked to carry it over. And so there was a lot of discussion with the site providers and was with the neighbors regarding that traffic. And so,
Yeah, that dredge is no longer there. They don't even dredge sand there anymore.
Okay. Any other questions?
now, this does come up for, Randy, renewal or review by the commission.
Yes, sir. Every 2 years.
And so if we have issues with hauling that is excessive or out of control, or if they're a bad corporate partner, we have the ability to review that every 2 years.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not saying that Midwest is or that Bettis Company is, but there is a right of review by the commission.
Yes, sir. You'll be furnished numbers of the number of trucks, the volume of materials excavated, and just a recap of their operation. And our Public Works Department will go out there and look at the roads, do an inspection, and I'm sure the township would do the same. And if there's anybody who has a concern, they would bring it to this body and would address it before you.
And it does not have to be every 2 years, right?
No,
This
it
would
has to be every
any-
two.
Oh, I mean, right, but we could do it sooner than that.
Oh, yes.
As well.
There is a provision for the commissioners to go out if there's violations before then.
That's correct. There's this condition 18 that talks about the 2 years, report to the commission, and I won't read all that extensive information, but basically it says everything they have to report back to this body. And in condition number 13, you have the authority here to stop something. If somebody is, if this is granted, it's for sand, if all of a sudden they're pulling out gravel, you can stop it and say, hey, you've exceeded the boundary of the CUP that was granted. And you can, or if they're doing something, say they've taken down some berms or something, you can order, by number B, you can order remediation of any issue that's not being performed to the letter of the conditions of approval. And you can suspend, you can suspend operations, you can suspend the permit, or you can revoke the permit. So you can do things for a small issue, you can do things for the ultimate bad issue to cancel the CUP. And any kind of negative issue could come to us or to the Public Works Department from the township or from some other entity. And once we're aware of it, we will investigate what's going on and follow the due process procedures that are set out here, and then bring it to this body for action.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? Okay, well, with the conditions that we've just laid out regarding the hours, regarding the 2D, concrete, rubble, or riprap, regarding the fencing, the length of Phase 1 on the western edge. Am I missing anything?
The dredging on Saturdays, again, as stated by.
Hours.
What's that?
Did you mention hours?
Yes, the hours. Being 8 to 6 Monday through Friday, 8 to 12 on Saturdays, on days that they have school in Shawnee County, or in Shawnee Heights District. And
Mr.
then-
Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sure that our Madam Clerk is first going to want us to make a motion to approve those changes, and then take up a motion to approve the conditional use permit. Is that correct, Ms. Clerk?
I would like that.
Okay,
Make it clear.
Then I will make a motion to amend the proposed conditional use permit with those stated changes.
I'll second that.
okay. Motion's been made by Commissioner Cook, seconded by Commissioner Rippon. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. We're back on the conditional use permit as amended. I would move that we approve the conditional use permit as amended.
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Rippon. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. I feel like we had a really good conversation. We made some changes that I feel will be in the best interest of the community. And next item, please.
Item D, Health Department. Number 1, consider authorization and execution of contract C-53-2022, an agreement with the City of Topeka to receive $250,000 from the Community Development Block Grant for COVID-19 mitigation.
Hey, Derek, before we get started, could you let's just hang on for a second.
Usually this is our doing.
Okay, Derek.
All right. Well, good late morning, commissioners. Derek Flairlock, Infectious Disease Manager for the Health Department. Here to ask for your approval to enter into an agreement with the City of Topeka, $250,000 from the Community Development Block Grants for COVID-19 mitigation. This could be used for a variety of things, everything from vaccine, PPE, to testing. I think one of the things I'll note is that we were approached by the city kind of offering these funds. And our intention is to use them most heavily in the PPE and the testing realm, really for the community's sake. So we're working on securing over-the-counter tests that we could distribute out to the community, and the potential of opening up a community testing site as well. Kind of, the uncertainty around KDHE's free testing sites that they currently have in the community, and not being privy to those timelines, trying to think long-term in terms of what COVID testing looks like. So we're also wanting to. We'll need PPE for testing operations, but also for community distribution as well, supporting organizations or businesses and those in need. So we always look at everything through an equity lens, and that's what we'll do here as well. And we'll kind of keep you all updated on where we go with this, should you approve.
All right, any questions for Derek?
What would you be testing for? Is this for COVID-19, or is this for a variant, or what would
Yeah.
you be testing for?
Yeah, so the test itself, at this moment in time, just tests for COVID in general. Most tests that are available are the antigens, and so those you're not able to test specifically for the variant. Now, you'll still get a positive or a negative result, but to look for what lineage, as they call it, what variant it is, would require additional testing, and those are really only available on the PCR tests, which, to be honest, we're really not looking into at this point in time. We like the antigens because they're quick, they're less pricey as well, and they're more easily distributed out into the community. So you still get that positive or negative, which is ultimately what you would want. And then, we rely on kind of what the state gets back on their variant sequencing, as they call it, to see what's kind of being transmitted. So.
Okay, any other questions?
Nope. No.
All right, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you very much.
Next item, please.
Item 5, public comment.
Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak today? Seeing none, next item.
Item 6, administrative communications.
Okay, this is an opportunity for department heads to speak. Bill Sutton, you're up first.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bill Sutton, Shawnee County Solid Waste. I thought I had an audience today, but obviously they did not come to hear me. I would like to announce that the Shawnee County Solid Waste Department, we become a sponsor with KTWU for this year's Mr. Rogers Sweater Drive. Mr. Rogers Neighborhood Coat and Sweater Drive. This is their 5th annual event that they hold every February, and they set up collection spots around Topeka collecting cold weather items, and this supports the local 501 Warm Little Ones campaign and 501 school district. So again, if you just go to their website, KTWU, click on the sweater drive, there's more information, and again, it runs through the month of February, and they're asking for either new or clean used cold weather items that will be distributed to families in need in the 501 school district. And that's all I've got. Thank you, gentlemen.
Great, sounds like a great program. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, next item.
Commissioners have anything?
What?
Commissioners, anything?
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Rippon, please.
Okay. I had the opportunity to volunteer a couple different days for Dino Days with the Sioux, the T-Rex we have over at the Great Overland Station. If you haven't had a chance to go see that, it's great. And that they're still looking for volunteers too to fill the lanes. So if you feel so inclined, they're I say, they're looking for volunteers, but it's a great exhibit, so.
I agree. Commissioner Cook?
Commissioner Mays, I'm sure that you're going to announce our JADO meeting on Wednesday.
Yep, I was planning on it. If I don't get ahead of myself.
I don't have anything else.
We do have a JADO meeting scheduled for Wednesday. It's a very light agenda that day, but I believe at 6 o'clock. It'll be in the city council chambers across the parking lot from us. That's all I've got, though. Anything else?
No.
Okay, next item, please.
Item 7, executive session.
We do have a need for executive session today. We'll be discussing matters relating to employer-employee negotiations, whether or not in consultation with the representative or representatives of the body or agency, specifically regarding the Teamsters. And I would move that we do that for a period of 15 minutes, beginning at 11:36. Give us a minute and a half
Yes,
to
a
walk
minute
over
to-
there.
Second.
All right, motion's been made by Commissioner May, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, motion passes 3-0. We will be in executive session.
Mr. Chair, no action is expected.
No action is expected. Thank you. Might need a new chair. With almost perfect timing, we are back from executive session. No action was taken, and without any other business before us, we are adjourned.